Another really fun day here on Locked On Blue Devils. Another opportunity to have a Duke men's basketball recruiting look back. This time, we're going to take the opportunity to look back to the class of 2017. What a good one it was for the Duke Blue Devils. We discussed that on today's show. Let's get right to it.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. It's so great to have you here with us today. What a fun episode of Locked On Blue Devils we've got planned for you as we're going to take a look back at the class of 2017 recruiting for Duke men's basketball with our good pal Jason Jordan, the Locked On college basketball recruiting insider, and of course the director of college basketball recruiting for Sports Illustrated. That's coming up on today's show. If you haven't done so already, be sure to follow our show on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure you watch the show daily each and every day on YouTube and subscribe over there as well. Your support means the absolute world. We've got to take this time to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football and college basketball recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Network. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So let's dive right in. Let's bring in my good buddy, Jason Jordan, again, the director of recruiting for Sports Illustrated and our Locked On recruiting insider. And Jason, we're going to take a look at this class of 2017. We've been doing this each and every week. Duke has picked up a bunch of momentum in the one-and-done era following the 2015 national championship. And take a look at this new class, and that's the same story once again, able to put together a really good group of talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nothing new for Duke landing top classes. It's almost become the standard for them. But, that comes with a lot of expectations. And, they've benefited and been hurt by that. So it's a two-sided coin in every way.
So let's take a look at this 2017 class for Duke. 7 players total in the class, including 3 guys in which Alex O'Connell, Jordan Goldwire, and Jordan Tucker. We're not going to spend as much time talking about those guys at all. They're not as significant, frankly, as the other guys in this class. But O'Connell was the first 3 Duke transferring to Creighton. And then the second player that signed on was Gary Trent Jr., who chose to play for the Blue Devils. Yeah. He was at Prolific Prep at the time. I did some research, Jason. I found some old stories you were writing for USA Today when he made his decision ultimately to play for Duke. But time at Prolific Prep, and then what people might not remember or might not realize is that Gary Trent Jr. was actually from the Apple Valley area where the Jones brothers were playing as well.
Yeah, definitely played the same AAU team, Howard Pulley. Shout out to Howard Pulley. But yeah, definitely that certainly helped. Gary was a blogger for me for a few years there at USA Today. So we talked a lot, and Tice was always in his ear, about Duke, and that definitely impacted him. And seeing, Tice go before him and have great success there. So that was definitely a major impact, having him as an advocate. Sure.
We see the player he is in the NBA today, and I think he surprised a good number of folks, not the diehard Duke fans, because we knew the ability was there. We know that he can absolutely shoot the basketball like crazy, but Toronto has absolutely fallen in love with Gary Trent Jr. Now a few seasons into his NBA career. Tell us about Gary Trent, the player, back in his high school days.
Yeah, so I always thought he would be really successful in the NBA, and I thought he would get better as the spacing got better in college. Sure. In the pros. I mean, he's 6'6" and he's knocking down shots efficiently. So sometimes we make it too hard, like, so he's always been a sniper. And so at 6'6", But the big thing about him was he always had the mentality that he was like the best player on the court, which one of the biggest things I look at when looking at players is, their mentality. When there's adversity on the court throughout the course of a game, and, when they're just hot, and, that's easy then. But he kept the same mentality, and I knew that would take him very far.
And plays with so much confidence and
Yeah.
a swagger about him now. Definitely got more ink on the body than he did when he played for Duke and growing up, and has such a just fashion personality, it feels, there in Toronto. But, man, he is an absolute heck of a basketball player and continues to get better every year, it seems.
Absolutely. I mean, he'll have a long career. Like, he'll make a lot of money in the NBA, and Gary will. And that's a testament to him. He's a worker too. Now he's has one of the best work ethics. I mean, I think in that class you'd had Marvin, Trey Duval, Wendell, who Gary Trent was paramount in land. They were almost a package deal. We'll talk about that. But he wasn't the most heralded in that class. I mean, he was probably third.
Yeah.
Of the ones that ended up landing. But Gary's mentality is he was first.
Right.
So I always definitely admired that confidence that he has taken him far.
And the work ethic, too, is certainly something important to point out. We've seen at Duke our fair share of players who had fathers who played in the NBA and played at that level.
Yeah.
Gary Trent certainly fits in that category. I mean, his dad is his namesake, right? Gary Trent Jr. getting to play for Duke for one season. How much of an impact, not only in this instance, but just in general, when it comes to recruiting, is that to know that your pops was recruited at a pretty high level and went on to have a successful career? If you could kind of gear that conversation toward the Trent family.
Yeah, I mean, just the experience factor, and then how to sell that when that's the background, right? And so Duke's dealt with that a few times. They've gotten some, they haven't gotten some, but that's a different sell because you really have to speak to the dad, because you're not really wowing him.
Yeah.
You're not really wowing. It's a different conversation, and any coach will tell you that. But when you're dealing with a guy like Krzyzewski, I mean, he's seen everything. So there's a certain level of respect that is going to come into play when you're dealing with a legend. And, that was one of the biggest things that Duke had going for him, 100%.
Gary Trent Jr., the first big name in that class of 2017, recruiting for Duke men's basketball. You mentioned the connection to Wendell Carter Jr. I got to hear more about that, and we're going to do that right after this first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As we move forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, I'm JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Jason Jordan. All right, Wendell Carter Jr. from the state of Georgia, from the Atlanta area, a big commit for Duke, goes on to be a lottery draft pick after one season playing for Duke. Tell us how he winds up being a Duke Blue Devil, Jason.
Well, he and Gary, had talked for a while. Wendell, another one of my bloggers. I mean, I tell you, my blogger team would win a couple titles. I'm telling you.
And I like that they all have Duke connections. That's what I love.
Well, when I go for the best, and so when Duke
and
stays
Duke's doing the
top,
same,
it kind of goes hand in hand. But those guys were always in each other's ear about playing together, and they thought it was like a match made in heaven. I mean, they were on the EYBL, played against each other with Howard Pulley, and Wendell was at CP3, and so they played. They did battle in the spring and the summer, and they became really good friends. And they were pretty adamant. Gary, for sure, was adamant that he was going to play with Wendell, and so they didn't time it the same way that Ja and Tyus did on the same day at the same time. But it was kind of because they had hyped it so much. When Gary pulled the trigger, then Wendell pops 2 weeks later, there wasn't as much suspense around it because I
Starting to
knew
get a
that was
sense.
the plan. They tried to be like, "Oh, he's got to do what he's got to do," but to build some suspense. But it was like a foregone conclusion by that time, and so that was a huge get for Duke because Wendell was man, superstar. I
Yeah.
remember the summer before he committed, so the summer going in his senior year, he played against Marvin Bagley. I believe it was in Atlanta, and it was like standing room only in the EYBL. And my goodness, I mean, what a battle! But he won the matchup because he gave Marvin like 30 and 12, and it was like that too. Like
Yeah.
he was giving him work, but Marvin would give it back a little bit. But he won the matchup, and it was interesting to see those two team up together. I thought that would be an unstoppable
Yeah.
front court. So
We saw Wendell's defensive certainly
yeah,
at his time at Duke on the interior, and
yeah,
then just the lob threat he was, how versatile he was in the post scoring.
yeah,
Saw a little bit of the jump shot, but in his
right.
NBA career, drafted by the Chicago Bulls, and now playing with Orlando Magic. I mean, he is a pure stretch five. I mean, Wendell Carter Jr. not afraid at all in his professional career to step out and knock down the shots from the outside, Jason.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's always had that. Sometimes, at Duke, Marvin was featured, right? Just because he did a lot of stuff. He was a little more fluid.
Yeah.
Did a lot of different stuff well at that level. But Wendell's probably just coming into his own in the last few years, and so that's good to see because he's a hardworking kid, great kid, one of the best to deal with in that class. He and Gary really, and yeah, he's another one that had a great work ethic, very successful because of his work ethic. So just a big body, man. He did a lot of things well, super versatile. Um, yeah, and one of the better players in that class for sure. Easily top five.
What a class of 2017 it was for Duke specifically. And now let's keep moving forward. We'll get to Bagley in just a moment. But the point guard for the Duke Blue Devils that season, Trey Duval. Tell me a little bit about the stories you remember with him.
Yeah, man. He was late. I think he was like Mayish. He was
Yeah.
definitely after definitely the spring, definitely a spring commit. And that could have gone a couple different ways. I know Baylor was heavy on him, Kansas, and even Arizona was very, very much in there. But he was always one of the best. A lot of people were comparing him to. Now they weren't the same. Let me before I get in trouble. But Kyrie, just because of his quickness and his craftiness with the ball,
Right.
he played, and so he was super athletic. So he was always making a highlight reel or something like that. But the thing with Trevon, he was dominant in the spring. He played on the Under Armour circuit with We Are One, and he dominated the Under Armour circuit. I mean, he was just cooking those guards, right? And the thing with him was, I always was a little when he committed to Duke. I was like, well, that could be good, but he's not a great communicator, right? So he doesn't talk a lot. I think that could be an issue. Personality wise, I think there could be an issue there. So, and I think it did sting him a little bit that he wasn't like K at the point. K wants a leader, a
Right.
leader who's gonna talk and pull people's coattails, even as a freshman, because he'll give you that rope if you're that guy. And I knew Trevon, the communication was gonna be the biggest, and defense. I mean, but that's for most freshman guards. But communication was going to be the biggest curb for him, and it did end up being that.
Yeah. And you hate to call it a doghouse or whatever throughout Coach
Yeah.
K's career, but there were moments
Yeah.
during his lone season for Duke where he just
Oh.
wasn't getting the chance to play
Yeah.
as much, as you said, for a variety of different reasons. The talent was there, and I'm going to get more into that NCAA tournament run that Duke had because down the stretch they really started to figure things out with how loaded that team was for Duke, and Trevon Duval was one of the big reasons why they took that next step. I can remember a couple of just massive dunks that he had in NCAA tournament games, and then decided, hey, it's the tournament. This is when the lights are shining brightest. Let me make the jump shot work a little bit. And I mean, he played really, really well in the NCAA tournament. but then doesn't get drafted. And we haven't
Yeah.
seen him really get his opportunity in the NBA. What do you think is the reason for that? Is it back to the communication thing, or what do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, guards have to knock down shots, and so
Yeah,
that was one of the things where he was really, really challenged.
sure.
Even in high school, like, he wasn't knocking shots down. He was getting past everybody. He was quicker than everybody, faster, and then super athletic. And so nobody could stay, especially respectfully Under Armour, but on the Under Armour circuit, he was really
Sure.
dominant. So he never really had to work on that jump shot, and just even mechanics. His mechanics, even at Duke. In that offense, you're always, as they pass the ball around the perimeter, there's always a guy on the extra pass who's gonna be open for that top of the key three or that left wing three, because there's so many threats on the perimeter at Duke in most years. And so he just couldn't knock that shot down consistently, and that was that's a big hurdle for him, because that shot is going to be there, and so he hasn't consistently proven that he's going to knock that shot down. So I think that's the biggest thing. You got to be able to knock shots down.
Fair.
Yeah,
Fair.
it's just the
Fair.
truth.
Yeah, no doubt about
Or
that.
you're going to be a lockdown defender, and he's not that.
Right.
Truth.
It is what it is. It is what
Yeah.
it is. Still a 1 year for Duke, and
Yeah.
bet on himself. Did get some G League run, and we'll see
Yeah.
what his basketball career continues to look like in the years to come, and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. All right, so we keep moving forward with this class of 2017, and Marvin Bagley III is up next. We're at a time in the recruiting world over the last few years, Jason, where everybody in America wants to know what's going on at Sierra Canyon because of Bronny James and what's taken place. But a few years ago, Marvin Bagley III was playing there. Duke also had Cassius Stanley a couple of years later come to Duke by way of Sierra Canyon. So tell me a little bit about Marvin Bagley III, because also we'll remind people he was originally in the class of 2018 with Zion and RJ and Cam, and then decides to reclass and come a year earlier.
Yeah, he did it really late too. I mean, I think it was like late summer.
You're
I
right.
think into
Yep.
July, maybe August or something like that of that year. So yeah, he was just dominant. He was probably the best player. I said Wendell gave him that work, but at the end of the day, he was still, the best, most consistent player. And he was in the league, in the EYBL,
Right.
but he was an underclassman at the time when I'm saying he's the best player. So that says a lot in and of itself. 6'11", did everything well, knocked down shots consistently. To your point, like it wasn't like it is now, where that's not uncommon to see a 6'10" guy out there handling the ball, igniting the break. We were just starting to see that
More of that,
more
yeah.
and more prevalent. Like Marvin was kind of one of the pioneers pushing that, not first, but one in that first wave of those super versatile 6'10" guys who
Totally
do
fair to
everything,
say. Yeah.
right? Super agile, and just a great rebounder, just a nose for the ball, got a lot of putbacks off that second jump, cleaned the glass, and wasn't a big ego guy, didn't talk a lot. Just really got it done, really went to work, really got it done. Wasn't a guy who liked a lot of attention. Didn't have the personality like Gary or
Right.
even Wendell, who is an actor. But he was definitely one of those just lunch pail guys who just came and worked and didn't get involved with all the other noise.
How surprised were you that he wanted to reclass and kind of go up a year?
Not surprised, because that was kind of the foregone conclusion. That was the back channel
Okay.
conversation. That was always a plan. I had heard about that for at least a few months before he had
Sure.
done it. That was the talk of the summer. I remember that. And so they were trying to, we don't know if we're going to do it. Who knows, right? But everybody who knew. And it was pretty much a foregone conclusion he was going to Duke too. That wasn't shocking. Neither one of those things were shocking. I remember that. It wasn't like this big mystery, but it was a big hit.
I remember also arriving on campus. We talked in our recruiting look backs. One of the first guys we talked about was Austin Rivers, and he
Yeah.
completely changed Mike Krzyzewski's view on jersey numbers and got to wear number 0, right? And we talked about Sub-Zero. Bagley arrives, and he wants to wear 35 for Duke, but it's currently retired and hanging in the rafters with Duke honoring Danny Ferry, and he got Danny Ferry's permission to be able to rock the 35. And as someone who myself focuses way too much on jersey numbers and the silly things, that was definitely something that kind of stuck out to me about Bagley III for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and at the time, people might be like, "Oh, well, he didn't," and look at the NBA now. I mean, he's not doing what you guys are saying. He was a superstar, but and then when they got him, I mean, he's definitely the guy that the OG is gonna give him the number.
Right.
Like, oh, him? Yeah, I heard of him. That kind of thing.
For sure.
So yeah. That's right on. Yeah, he definitely.
And again, I mean, we haven't talked about Bagley's professional career, and I really don't want to dive into it that much. With what he's been able to do in Sacramento and now at the Detroit Pistons. It hasn't lived up to top 3 draft pick billing. But as a college basketball player, oh my goodness, the year he had playing for the Duke.
Man.
Holy cow, the run he was able to have in Durham.
Oh yeah, he was different. I mean, he that freshman 21 and 11. I mean, come on, at Duke on a traveling all-star team. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he was. I think they had 5 or 6 guys in double figures. So
insane stuff.
Then you look at their I think only Trevon's the one that didn't end up in the NBA.
Correct.
So that in and of itself. And then, he's on a team with Grayson Allen.
Right.
Where it's kind of Grayson Allen's show.
Yep.
But, Grayson Allen kind of deferred to him because, I mean, he's special, and that gave them their best chance to win. So, he's definitely a superstar.
Let's get set to wrap up our conversation today with our buddy Jason Jordan, the director of college basketball recruiting for Sports Illustrated and our Locked On Recruiting Insider after our final timeout here on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your #1 source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got all of it at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those too. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside Jason Jordan. We've been talking about the class of 2017 recruiting for Duke, focusing on 4 players in Bagley III, Carter Jr., Trent Jr., Trevon Duval, and then Grayson Allen was in his senior season playing for Duke. What a year it was for the Duke Blue Devils. As come NCAA tournament time, they're absolutely playing their best basketball in the world. We're one of the best teams in America, make a run all the way to the Elite Eight in a game that I truly will never forget, Jason. Grayson had a runner at the rim that I felt hit the rim a million different times, didn't go in, goes to overtime. Malik Newman at Kansas had the game of his life.
He did.
And 32 points in that one. And Duke's season unfortunately came to a close. But man, that is one of those Duke teams where you get a little spoiled when you have the #1 recruiting class year after year after year. But that in particular is one of those teams, Jason, where it just stings a little bit that they couldn't ultimately be the last team to cut down.
Yeah, I remember watching that game. I feel like, and I don't know the date on that game, but I feel like we were at McDonald's All-American. Watching that game, if I'm not mistaken. And, so like the kids were there. But I remember that may have been Trevon Duval's best game of his year.
100%. You're exactly right. And, that's what I was mentioning. It came to be tournament time and he stepped up.
Yeah. Because Malik Newman, another one of my bloggers, shout out to me for my NBA title. I would be one of my bloggers. But like I feel like that's one of those things where the old school coaches are going to rock with the leader. When but Grayson, if I remember correctly, was not having a good game.
No.
And Trevon was having an amazing game, and I felt like they should have rode Trevon kind of but K
Right.
in classic K fashion, and all the legends are like that. Roy Williams is like that. All of them, all all the old school coaches are like they're gonna ride with the leader,
Sure.
and so they but I say that, but if to your point it rolled around, I remember that shot hung up there on the rim like should I
To win, yeah.
right in overtime. So it was just the call they made. But Trevon, I remember Trevon Duval. I thought that might have got him in the league. I
Same.
thought that might have got him drafted. But I think there were some other things working against him. So
That game,
that was a great game.
I will tell you, that game did get Malik Newman drafted because if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken, I do think he snuck into the second round there. And I will never 32 points, could not miss from 3-point range in that game. And I was,
Man.
I know he's a great player, Jason, but when
Yeah.
you just weren't expecting that based on the numbers going
No.
into the season, it stings a little bit more.
Yeah. Malik couldn't miss that game. He could. he definitely took it back to high school on that one.
Yeah. Well, Jason, this is always so much fun each and every week. Tell us one more time about all of the college basketball recruiting coverage that you handle.
Oh yeah, well, catch me on Twitter, Jason Jordan SI, Jason C Jordan on Instagram. We're full-fledged in the season now, man. So gonna be a lot of things coming up, and definitely keep an eye on what we got coming.
Can't wait. Thanks so much for the time, Jason. We'll do this again soon, okay?
Look forward to it.
That's my pal Jason Jordan joining us on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that's going to bring our conversation to a close. Thanks so much to Jason for joining us on today's program. That's going to do it for today's show. Please be sure once again to follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Follow and subscribe to this podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts. Also be sure to subscribe to our page on YouTube. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.